Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Rachel Burden and Ben Thompson.
Our headlines today. The Prime Minister is set to unveil a coronavirus warning system when he outlines plans tonight to gradually ease the lockdown.
The government drops the stay-at-home part of its slogan, instead urging us to stay alert.
Calls for a public inquiry into why twice as many black and ethnic minority people are dying from Covid-19 than white people.
Good morning. Rushing to restart the Premier League could cost lives. That's the warning from Brighton's Chief Executive Paul Barber as clubs await the Prime Minister's address to the nation and what it means for the world of sport.
Good morning. It's a colder day across the whole of the UK today, with brisk northeasterly winds starting to take over. All the details coming up shortly.
Good morning, it's Sunday the 10th of May. Our top story today, a coronavirus alert system similar to the one used to describe the terror threat is expected to be announced during Boris Johnson's televised address this evening.
The Prime Minister will outline a roadmap towards easing lockdown restrictions in England and has also changed the government's slogan on coronavirus, advising us to stay alert rather than to stay home. Andy Moore reports.
As the sun shone, police in Hackney in East London said they were fighting a losing battle to persuade people to stay at home. They said hundreds of people were out enjoying food and drinks. They tried to remind them that they should be only out for exercise. With the lockdown apparently fraying in some parts, Boris Johnson will tonight outline how it will be eased very slowly and very cautiously. First, there will be another meeting of the Cobra Emergency Committee before his televised address at 7 o'clock. He's expected to announce a scale of coronavirus alerts similar to the system for terrorism. They will range from level 5 red to level 1 green. We're said to be currently at level 4, moving towards level 3.
Thank you, NHS.
There will be a new slogan too: stay alert, control the virus and save lives. Mr Johnson says that descending from the coronavirus peak, like climbing down a mountain, is the most dangerous part. He told The Sun on Sunday, "You have very few options on the climb up, but it's on the descent you have to make sure you don't run too fast, lose control and stumble." The government is emphasising that any changes to the lockdown will only be made with extreme caution.
Importantly, it is true to say that moving beyond COVID will be a gradual process, not a single leap to freedom. So when we do emerge, the world will seem quite different.
Yesterday, the government said another 346 people had died with coronavirus in all settings, bringing the total death toll to 31,587. A few days ago, the government said there were some problems with the lab system for testing coronavirus swabs. It's now emerged that 50,000 samples have been flown to America for analysis there. It's not known how long it will take for the results to come back. The UK has failed to reach the target of 100,000 tests a day for 7 days in a row now. But the government said testing overall was at a much higher level than it had been. Andy Moore, BBC News.
Well, let's get the latest now from our political correspondent, Nick Eardley. Nick, earlier in the week, it seemed like the government was suggesting we might see something fairly concrete today, some definite easing of the lockdown. But the messages now coming over in the last couple of days are a lot more conservative, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be really limited, to be honest with you, Rachel. I think the changes we see in the next few days will be few and far between. Number 10 has been at pains to point out that it's going to take this extremely cautious approach over the short term anyway. We know that Wales has already introduced a system where you'll be allowed to exercise more than once a day. Garden centres and libraries might start reopening over the next few days if they can maintain social distancing. I think we're probably looking at something similar around the UK with some nuances in different countries. What the Prime Minister is going to do, as you saw in Andy's package there, is replace the stay-at-home slogan with this stay alert, control the virus and save lives idea instead. I've got to say already there's been quite a lot of pushback against that, quite a lot of criticism from Boris Johnson's political opponents because they think it muddies the waters a bit and maybe can create some confusion about whether we are still supposed to stay at home or whether that guidance is now slowly starting to change. We'll find out more on that from the Prime Minister at 7 o'clock tonight. But as I say, I think more broadly, don't expect huge changes overnight. Expect some plans for how changes might be brought in over the next few weeks and months.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick Eardley. The Prime Minister will be speaking at around about 7 o'clock this evening. I think Nicola Sturgeon is also due to give a statement before that this afternoon.
Yes, well, the trade association that represents retailers says that the reopening of schools and transport networks needs to be a priority when those lockdown measures are eased.
The British Retail Consortium has outlined some of the steps it hopes to see when Boris Johnson starts to lift social distancing restrictions in England. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Austin.
While the 2 Rumsey's chocolate cafes are closed, 46 staff are on furlough. Manager Kate is nervous about reopening for takeaway until she hears the Prime Minister's plans for coming out of lockdown.
We need a lot of guidance from the government to do that. So how I can safely bring staff back and probably have them working in relatively close proximity to each other. Do they need to wear masks? Do we need screens up? Can we allow customers in the shop from a takeaway perspective? Do we need to provide hand sanitizer, temperature controls? There's so many questions that we have. If we do open, we want to make sure we're doing it right and doing it safely. So yeah, guidance from the government is something that we're really eager for at the moment.
With her staff worried, Kate also wants to know what will happen to the furlough scheme after June. One organisation which represents shops expects there to be a very gradual lifting of restrictions and for the government to issue practical guidelines on reopening. But it says businesses need schools and transport to be addressed early.
Retail employs a lot of people. A lot of those people have children, and therefore without the schools being open, then the ability of those people to work in retail becomes that much more difficult. Within the industry itself, I think the absolute focus should be around safety first, as opposed to trying to draw lines in terms of different sizes of stores or different types of businesses.
Pret is one cafe chain which will be opening up more stores for takeaway and delivery with safety measures. But the return for pubs and sit-in restaurants is expected to take much longer. Garden centres in Wales can open from Monday with social distancing, and it's thought those in England can too from Wednesday. Many other workplaces are waiting to find out what the future will look like. Katie Austin, BBC News.
More than 50 members of the black and minority ethnic community have signed a letter to the Prime Minister calling for a full public inquiry into why coronavirus affects BAME communities more than the white population. Downing Street says it's commissioned urgent work to understand the factors that can influence the way the virus affects people. Our health correspondent Lauren Moss has the details.
Many lives have been lost, including healthcare workers on the front line. And there's no clear explanation why people from BAME backgrounds appear to be disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Elizabeth Henry advises the Church of England on race and ethnicity. She's one of dozens of people who've written to the Prime Minister saying the pandemic has directed a spotlight on race and health inequalities.
It's alarming. And I also have to think of many, many people in this country who on hearing that will be experiencing and suffering additional fear to what I'm sure all of us have at the moment in relation to COVID-19.
Taking into account geography and broad measures of education and wealth, the Office for National Statistics found that compared with white people in England and Wales, black men and women are 90% more likely to die if they become very ill with COVID-19. This is slightly lower for those from Bangladeshi and Pakistani origin at 60 to 80%. It found people with Indian heritage are 30 to 40% more likely to die. Public Health England is examining thousands of medical records to explore how different groups are affected by coronavirus, and a report is due at the end of the month. But the letter to Boris Johnson's calling for other things to be considered, including how healthcare workers have been exposed to COVID-19 and funding in areas where there is a significant BAME population.
there is a signal around black and minority ethnic groups. No one, I think, is trying to brush that under the carpet or say it's not there, but it is complicated. We are taking this incredibly seriously, and we are determined to get to the bottom of it in a proper and scientific way.
There are many questions about how the pandemic has taken hold in the UK. The answers won't be quick or easy to find. Lauren Moss, BBC News.
Former US President Barack Obama has strongly criticised his successor Donald Trump over his response to the coronavirus crisis. In a leaked recording, Mr. Obama has been heard describing Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic as a chaotic disaster. White House officials defended President Trump, saying his response had been unprecedented and had saved American lives.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.